Hi, I'm Wesley Ferreira, Clarinet professor at Colorado State University. And today I'm going to discuss ways to help you prepare for this year's Colorado All-State Band and Orchestra audition. In this video, Rose Etude number 17 will be our focus. When preparing for an audition, it's important to try and determine what the particular musical selection chosen is meant to highlight. Rose's Etude number 17 is marked Adagio Cantabile, with an added dolce character indication in the first measure. These markings suggest that the etude is to be played slowly, sweetly, and in a singing style. Keep this in mind and practice with these characteristics during your entire preparation process. The All-State audition requirement is to perform the first 9 measures of this etude at 8th note equals 80. It is clear then that this etude, compared to the other, is meant to highlight more of your tone, musicality, and ability to subdivide. As with all of your clarinet playing, using good practice techniques will be the key to learning this etude properly and doing your best come audition day. Let's go over some important and basic concepts to keep in mind when preparing this etude. Subdividing. For many, the opening 2 measures presents a possible first obstacle. Make sure to keep a steady 8th note subdivision going from the outset. This will allow you to place the 8th notes in their accurate rhythmic position and prevent you from rushing throughout the rest of the etude. While breathing and musicality will allow for stretching of the pulse, the 8th note subdivision should be kept relatively even. Let's take a look at the opening 2 measures while I demonstrate. With my metronome on, I will pay attention to the 8th note subdivision. It's very important that when you play the dotted quarter note as a dotted quarter note, that you feel and think of the even 8th note pulses underneath. This will keep you from rushing. It will allow you to play the rhythm accurately. You may use the technique of playing the subdivision of long-held notes in many spots of this etude as well. This kind of feeling and thinking of the subdivision will be beneficial when practicing this etude because of the many shifts in rhythms between measures. In just this short 9-measure excerpt, we see half notes, quarter notes, 8th, 16th, and 32nd notes. I suggest that even before you begin, that you write into your music some tick markings where all of the 8th note subdivisions reside. You'll see that I've made these markings in red in measures 3 to 5. Each red tick marking corresponds to an 8th note subdivision and 1 click of the metronome at 80. Practice aligning all of the written rhythms with the 8th note subdivision, clicking on the metronome throughout the etude, so that over time you will be able to perform without the metronome accurately. You will feel the subdivision internally. Performing this etude in character is going to be another very important aspect of your performance. Use continuous air support and play with your very best tone to achieve the dolce characteristic. I always tell my students that playing with air support means that you should focus on your air continuously moving out of you, moving down the length of the tube of the clarinet, and hearing the sound come out of the bell. Achieving the dolce character means that your articulation should be legato and your breaths need to be silent. And here's a tip. Pay attention to how the ends of your notes sound. We too often focus on how the beginning and the middle of the notes sound, and then we mentally move on to the beginning of the next note, without really listening to the ends of the previous notes. Performing this piece in character also means that you should pay attention and adhere to all dynamic markings and indications. Though there is not a dynamic level indicated in the opening, playing at a mezzo piano level is appropriate. This will allow your tone to sound with presence while playing dolce, and will give you room to grow to the forte level required later, and contrast nicely with the piano dynamic level indication also appearing in the excerpt. Now, if you look at the page, there are also many other dynamic indications, crescendi and decrescendi. Be sure to play the crescendo in measure 6 gradually and throughout that measure because it leads to the downbeat, the high C, in measure 7. Also, be sure not to miss the crescendo in measure 8 on the chromatic scale. Following these indications will make your performance more musical and will separate you and your playing from the other applicants auditioning. Before I demonstrate the portion of the Etude required for the All-State Band and Orchestra audition this year, I want you to look at this side-by-side comparison of Rose Etude number 17. The example on top is the version which appears on page 17 of the Carl Fischer edition. The example on the bottom is the version which appears on page 21 of the revised edition by Carl Fischer. You'll notice that there are differences. The revised edition, edited by one Melvin Warner, includes more direction for the performer. There are more dynamic and stylistic indications in this edition, such as playing a diminuendo and ritardando in measure 7, leading to what he labels the cadenza in measure 8. Although these markings do not appear in the original edition, they are appropriate. There are a few differences in articulation, too, between the two versions, such as the end of measure 4. Both versions of this Etude are acceptable for your all-state audition. As a performer, and perhaps with the guidance of your teacher, you should decide on how you will perform measure 8. You'll see that in the original edition, the one on the top of the screen, there was a tie between the low C natural and the beginning of the chromatic run. In the revised edition on the bottom of the screen, the editor has placed a fermata over the low C natural, and there was no tie to the beginning of the chromatic run. Again, both options are appropriate. This is where you need to make an artistic and musical decision. How long should you hold the low C? How fast should you play the chromatic scale? How loud should the arrival note, the altissimo D, sound? Should you hold the altissimo D with a fermata or simply play it in tempo? Should you breathe after the high D? You'll hear the choices that I've made in my performance, but know that there are many valid options. I do believe quite strongly, however, that the cadenza ends in measure 9 and that you should perform that measure in the tempo of the opening, 8th note equals 80. Feel the 8th note subdivision underneath the half note in that measure, as we discussed earlier, to keep you honest. Finally, you'll notice that this Etude is rather operatic. This does not mean that you should not play with even rhythm, but what it does mean is that as in the manner of a singer, you can take some time and liberty playing the technical passages in measure 3 and in measure 7. Because the human voice does not have the flexibility and technical capability to play each note as fast as the clarinet. An operatic singer would naturally take time in these places. It's been a pleasure sharing my thoughts on this Etude. If you have any questions, please feel free to post them in the comments section below. Or you can email me. Also, feel free to email sound or video files if you'd like me to review them and offer suggestions. I hope to see many of you at the All-State Band and Orchestra weekend this year, and even at the various honor bands in our state that use this same Etude. Good luck with your auditions.